And welcome back to 110 Daily. I'm Josh, he's Chris here with you on a Tuesday. It's that time to unveil our power rankings this week, our top 10 teams in the NFL. Chris, would you like to kick things off?
Oh, sure. I would be honored. We're gonna start at the bottom again, right? Start with
Oh,
10 and
yes.
work our way up.
Oh, yes. We saved the
All
best
right.
for last.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. All right. I have the Colts at number 10. And I guess first of all, I guess some overall observations before I even get dive into the Colts. I had a really easy time with the top five, and then we got into six and seven, and I was pretty confident in that next group. And then again, it got very messy after that. There were a couple of teams that I felt needed to go in the range between 8 and 10, but then I really kind of struggled, wrestle back and forth with a couple of teams for the 10 spot. Went with the Colts. They bounced back from that loss against the Titans that we talked about last week by taking care of business on the road against the Texans, which they're finding a more balanced offensive approach at the right time. Philip Rivers has been a pretty steady hand. They played smart situational football. The defense has been a bit shaky of late. Of course, that's been the Colts' calling card, but they did sack Deshaun Watson 5 times on Sunday. They're still a team that I have some faith in. I don't think the upside is super high for the Colts, but I think I had them actually a few spots higher last week, or it may have been in this back end range of the top 10, and that was despite that loss last weekend to the Titans, and then they went on the road, took care of business against the Texans. So I felt like they still belonged in my top 10.
I have them a little bit higher, so I'll save my thoughts for a second. I have the Rams at 10. It was one of the teams in
Wow,
this.
we're gonna have a fun discussion here.
I had them just on the outside last week. But what they did to the Cardinals, even though Kyler Murray's banged up, I couldn't ignore. Jared Goff was really, really good. Arizona's not winning that game when Jared Goff outplays Kyler Murray. That's just the reality of the situation. So if they get that Jared Goff, they will jump even higher on this list. I just need to see it more consistently. He has sort of not necessarily the same thing as Josh Allen. They're obviously very different quarterbacks, but that thing where he looks great, or somewhere between Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, I guess, where Allen looks really good most of the time. Baker Mayfield looks good sometimes. Jared Goff's kind of in between the two of them. He looks really
Mm-hmm.
good sometimes and not so great other times. It's kind of a 50-50 proposition. That's the biggest reason why I couldn't put him higher than 10. I'm just not sold on their ceiling, but I also felt that they deserved a spot in the top 10 because of that win they got, because they're right there now playing for this division. That deserves recognition from my perspective, considering how good that division is.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I'll save my thoughts on them as well because I have them several spots higher in my ranking. So I guess we'll save that. We'll get to those teams. You'll discuss the Colts. I'll discuss the Rams when we get there. At number 9, I have the Bucks. They're coming off a bye week. There's not a ton to say right there with them, other than that I think that bye week could be really helpful for them. I can't find my words today. Could be very helpful for them. I think that there's a chance that they come back from this break more put together. We know the pieces that they have. We know what they can be. Um, and I guess this isn't a ranking of can be. This is a power rankings, but at the same time, for me, I feel like this break might be really helpful for them. I would not be surprised to see them kind of coming out of the break firing on all cylinders. So I'm very interested to see what we get from the Bucks this weekend. But no other thoughts on that. They're number 9 for me.
I wouldn't be surprised if they come out looking really good and put it together, but I need to see it before I start thinking that that will actually happen, which is why I refuse to put them in the top 10 until they show it consistently. They've been so up and down so far, but the logic is right there. I was impressed by what I saw against Kansas City. That was sort of my takeaway from that game is if that's the Buccaneers team we're going to see and they can figure out how to do that every week, they're going to be one of the top 8, maybe even top 5 teams in the league come playoff time. I just need to see that a couple more weeks, put in a couple more performances like that. before going there. My 9 is the Colts. I had them ahead of the Titans last week. I have them ahead of the Titans again this week. I feel even stronger. They're the best team in this division. It wasn't necessarily pretty against the Texans, but they found a way to get the job done, make the plays that they needed to. Phillip Rivers continues to be good. I trust Phillip Rivers more than most of these teams that are still trying, not necessarily trying to figure out the quarterback position, but you got these Jared Goffs and Tua Tagovailoas and Ryan Fitzpatrick's in this group of teams, and Ryan Tannehill's. I like Phillip Rivers better than all of them, which is part. And I'm a huge Frank Reich fan, and I believe in that defense. I'm still high on the Colts. Completely agree. I don't feel great about their ceiling, but in terms of teams that I feel like are consistently performing as one of the 10 best in the NFL, to me they're right there. So I don't have the Titans in the top. I don't. You might have dropped them out too, but I don't have the Titans in my top 10. The Colts are my only team from the AFC South at 9.
Yeah, I had the Titans at my 11 spot, as in didn't actually put them there, but I was just those are the teams that just missed the cut. So the Titans are 11 for me, and yeah, so I completely agree with that assessment of the Colts. At number 8, I have a team that maybe you have a few spots higher. We could have a little discussion here. I don't know. I have the Seahawks. The Seahawks at number 8, coming off of that ugly loss to the Giants. And there are just some warning signs for me. I'm not saying that there isn't the potential for this team to really get going and be a real threat, because we absolutely know what they're capable of. But the defense has been steadily improving, but they continue to have some problems with the running game. And we're having another late season cool down from Russell Wilson in that offense. Wilson was sacked 5 times, turned the ball over twice against the Giants. They can turn this around. I think me ranking them 8th probably gives the signal that I'm, really pessimistic, really down on them right now, which I think is a little bit more than I want it to be, because I certainly feel like we could be in a situation where I'm quickly putting the Seahawks back up to 5 or, something like that, jumping them. But right now, and maybe, call it an overreaction. It's very possible that I'm overreacting a little bit too much with the Seahawks, but it doesn't look good right now. And it's, something we've seen before from that offense cooling down the stretch. I'm concerned. They can turn it around, but I feel like I need to reflect what's actually happening for them right now. So they're at 8th for me. Are they a team that's in that range for you, or are they a few spots higher?
No, they're in that range. That's not an overreaction at all. And especially when you look at this, I have 5 teams I knew were going to be my top 5.
Right.
It's a weekly discussion in my head about 6 through 10 and the order of 1 through 5. But there's a clear gap for me.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we have the same top 5 teams. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a clear cutoff there. So I felt much better about the Seahawks going into that game than I do now. I have them 1 spot higher. I have them at 7. But no, it's not an overreaction. That's incredibly concerning that you lost to the Giants. The reason... So I had the Dolphins 8.
Okay.
Who, by the way, have the 4th best point differential in the NFL, very quietly, in a pretty good division, aside from the Jets. I'm on the Brian Flores for Coach of the Year bandwagon. I love what he's doing. This team is not, again, we talk about ceilings. To me, their ceiling is even lower than the Colts' ceiling, which is why I can't put them any higher. But based on results and doing what you're supposed to do and beating the teams on your schedule that you should beat, they are doing a very good job of it. And so they're really starting to build some momentum. I have them at 8, and then I have the Seahawks at 7, just because I like their ceiling much, much better. And at this point, with how bad their defense has been, I would rather have the problem be the offense than the defense. Because it's Russell Wilson, I think they can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to see him fix it, which is why I have them 7. But I might have flipped those 2 teams if this was a continued problem on defense, as opposed to Russell Wilson and that offense just having a really bad game.
Sure, yeah, that's completely fair. And yeah, there's absolutely the scenario in which, like, this is the thing where you can Like it would not surprise me if they fix it quickly. Like
Hmm.
they snap your fingers and it could be fixed very quickly, which is why I certainly feel like there's a scenario in which I don't know their next opponent off the top of my head, but where there's a scenario with the Seahawks where I'm snapping my fingers and all of a sudden it's fixed. Like all of a sudden next week they're rising in the rankings significantly for me. As for the Dolphins, I think this was the case last week as well. I don't have them in my top 10.
Oh, Chris, no
So you call it,
respect.
yeah, I knew that's where you're going with this. But for what it's worth, they're 12th. They were my team of the two teams. I had the Titans, 11th, the Dolphins 12th. So they're not far behind. For me, you know, I don't have a great reason other than, I mean, right, you pointed out some of the things. I think their upside is just incredibly limited. And I think, right, I just feel like that schedule has been really weak for them. I'm looking at it now, and their wins over
Yeah,
Jacksonville, over the Jets, over the
bad
Jets again,
Patriots.
the bad Patriots, the Bengals. I mean, they don't really have those wins. I
No.
mean, there's a couple that are like, okay, those are pretty good, but there's no signature wins. There's no situation in which I think they've been really tested and come out on top. So that's it for me. That's one that along with the fact that I think their upside is limited is why I have them just out of the top 10, because I struggled to see which team. It was one of those things where there wasn't a team that I have in my top 10 that I felt like I could take out for them. But look, I got to give credit. It's probably that team that's not in my top 10 that deserves the most credit for what they've actually done on the field. Like we got to give, look, wins are wins, records the record, and I think that kind of leads into my next team, my seventh ranked team, which is the Browns, coming off a statement win against the Titans. Baker Mayfield, sensational, right? We all, this isn't a new headline as far as this game, and right. The reason I'm not super high on the Browns, why maybe you have them even higher, or maybe some people might have them higher. I didn't have them in my top 10 last week, and I think you criticized me for it. So I'm in. Had to get them in there. There's no denying what we saw on Sunday was sensational. That first half for Mayfield was incredible. Now I will say this about the Browns: 5 of their 9 wins were against the NFC East or the Bengals. I'm just saying. None of their other 4 wins were super impressive. Their 3 losses. This is a crazy thing for me. Their 3 losses to Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Las Vegas. They were outscored 92-19.
Mm-hmm.
92-19 against the 3 really good teams that they've played. That defense is still a big issue for me. A real concern. So I feel like the ceiling is high here too. I feel like I could absolutely not. I felt like I couldn't have them higher than 7th. There's a couple teams for me that I feel like, there's one more team for me, and then the top 5. But yeah, that's my Browns take. What do you have? It's at 7 or at 6? Are we at 6 for you?
So I've got the Seahawks at 7. I've got the Browns at 6.
Okay, right.
I'm partially there with you. It's not unfair. Yeah, right. They have a. We talk about the Dolphins having the 4th best point differential in the NFL. The Browns are still negative by, I believe it's 15.
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhere
like
in
that,
there.
yeah.
Right. They have not been convincing. And their last double-digit win was week 4. Now, they've beaten some quality AFC South teams, including this win over the Titans, in that stretch. But they're winning these games by 3, 4, 5, 6 points, which is why I cannot put them any higher than 6th. I also just can't argue with the fact that they continue to win football games and they're beating some decent teams. I would love to see what would happen, and we're gonna get this opportunity for a rematch against the Steelers. I'm very curious in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That could change how I feel about them. Baker Mayfield was really good. I still think he's a little bit unfairly criticized, although he has not lived up to the hype of being the number 1 overall pick. They're just record-wise better than the rest of these teams right now. I wanted to acknowledge that, but there are 5 teams I really like, and then there are these other teams that I go back and forth which ones I like more. I like the Browns right now, but there's a a sizable gap, as I've mentioned before, between them and these next 5 teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this: I have the Rams at 6 because I agree with you that there's a clear top five, and I think we're it's very clear at this point we're going to have the same top five in some order or another. I have the Rams 6, and I do just want to say with the Rams, of course, you mentioned right, you don't know what you're going to get from Jared Goff. The grade is pretty great, but when it's not happening, it's pretty ugly. The one thing I will say with the Rams, though, if they can protect Jared Goff, I think they're one of the most balanced teams in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a big if. That's a big if. I understand that you're right, and things have to go right. And I'm not saying that they belong in that tier of 5 teams that I have real confidence in. But in 10 of the 12, if you take out 2 games, which it's a big 2 games, I'll mention them in a minute. If you take out 2 games from the Rams' schedule this year, I think they're clearly the NFC West best team. Now, those other 2 games were losses to the 49ers. So, I mean, you can't just take those 2 games out. But right? Maybe they just had 49ers just have their number. And if you look at the body of work outside of those games, the rest of the evidence points to the Rams being the clear best team in that division. In my head, in my mind, I think that there's a scenario in which this is a team that, that defense doesn't get as much credit as I think it deserves. I have some optimism for the Rams. Now, I'm not saying that they belong again, not in that next tier, but I'm excited. But I still have some hope for them. And even despite those issues with Jared Goff.
I'll still take the Seahawks, but I needed to at least acknowledge what they did. They're right there, and they keep finding ways to stay in that conversation in the NFC West. All right, real quick, top 5. I have Bills at 5, Packers 4, Steelers 3, Saints 2, Chiefs 1. I'm scared for the Steelers. Drew Brees is on the verge of coming back for the Saints. Those 3 teams, the Chiefs, the Steelers, and the Saints, are the only ones with a plus 100 or better point differential. I'm just not sold on what we've seen from the Steelers so far. We've talked about that before. Very impressed with the Bills. They just need to be that team every week for me to put them ahead of the Packers. I just have a lot of faith in Aaron Rodgers and that team and Matt LaFleur and what they're doing since he's gotten that job. And the Chiefs have won 7 straight games. They're clearly the best team. So that's my top 5. Bills, Packers, Saints, Steelers, Chiefs.
Guess what? Our top 5s are identical because that is the bold move that I told you in the break I was considering making. Swapping teams. I had the Steelers at 2, the Saints at 3, but I decided to swap that. I decided to swap it before you said that, just to be clear. That was the call I was debating making. I have the Bills 5, Packers 4, Steelers, Saints, and Chiefs as well. So my quick thoughts on that again. Very impressed with the Bills, but like you said, we're going to have to see some consistency from that team showing up that way because I think it's going to be, they're going to have to show me a lot for me to bring them up over the Packers because, I said it last week. I'm really high on this team. I liked, again, what we saw from them this past weekend, of course. I think Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, best trio in the NFC. I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's very possible. You can make cases for other guys, but Rodgers and Adams are connecting on an incredible level. They played turnover-free football again against the Eagles. Right, the defense still struggles to contain the running game. There's a weakness for the Packers. There's a reason that they're not higher, but I'm high on them. I'm also high on what we've seen from the Saints. 9th straight win. 3 straight wins with Taysom Hill at quarterback.
Yep.
It hasn't been pretty for him, but at the end of the day, when you're going with a backup quarterback, wins are wins. It doesn't have to be pretty, and they're supposed to get Drew Brees back soon. And the Steelers, we talked about the reason why there's cracks there. Chiefs, not much to say. Look, they didn't look as sharp against the Broncos as we might have hoped, but they still showed that they're incredibly difficult to hold down for a full 60 minutes. And I think that's one of the things that makes them so impressive. And that's it. I think there's no debating the Chiefs at number 1, but those are my quick takes.
Yeah, after what happened to the Steelers, it's not a conversation at this moment in time anymore.
Right.
So there you have it. Our top 10 teams in the NFL. We're taking another break. When we come back, we're going to humor ourselves and hopefully humor you with random things that we want to talk about in our segment we call Humor Me Please. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.